You read one message twice, and suddenly your whole body feels louder. That tiny rush is where love often begins. Your brain notices love before your logic does. Maybe you know that pull more than you want to admit. Maybe you're living inside it right now. It can feel magical and strangely unsettling. That mix has a reason. Love is not just a feeling. It is a chain reaction. Your attention is usually the first part to fall. And that's why one person can suddenly stand out in a crowded world. By the end, you'll understand why some connections consume you, and why the healthiest ones eventually feel more like home than chaos. Love often starts with salience, which is your brain's way of highlighting one person and quietly dimming everyone else. That is why one laugh, one glance, or one goodbye can suddenly feel bigger than the rest of your day. Before love becomes a story, it becomes attention, and attention is one of the strongest currencies your brain has. Then the reward system joins in, especially dopamine, which helps create anticipation, pursuit, motivation, and that restless feeling of possibility. This is why uncertainty can feel so intense at first, because the brain loves rewards it cannot completely predict. A text arriving when you least expected it can hit harder than one that comes on schedule. That does not mean inconsistency is love. It means unpredictability can temporarily feel exciting because your brain keeps checking for relief. Here's the beautiful part. Real connection creates more than sparks. It creates meaning, and meaning reaches deeper than thrill. When someone remembers the small thing you said, your brain reads that as significance, not just charm or flirting. It thinks, this person sees me, and being truly seen is one of the oldest forms of emotional safety. Many of us say we want chemistry, but what we often melt for is recognition wrapped in chemistry. That is why love can feel both new and weirdly familiar at the same time. Sometimes that familiar feeling is healthy because it echoes warmth, steadiness, and respect you already trust. But sometimes familiar means pattern, and the brain can confuse recognition with compatibility. If you keep falling for the same kind of person, your brain may be choosing what feels known, not what feels good. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar peace when early closeness taught you to chase connection instead of receiving it. So when someone feels instantly irresistible, it helps to ask whether they feel nourishing or simply recognizable. That question changes everything because not every powerful pull is pointing towards something healthy. A secure connection often feels calmer than movies told you it would, and that calm can be easy to overlook. It may not flood your system with panic, longing, and obsession, so the brain sometimes mistakes peace for lack of depth. But depth and drama are not the same thing. That difference can save you years of confusion. Here's what's really going on. Your nervous system is part of your love life, even when you call it a vibe. Around the right person, your body slowly stops bracing, and that can be more intimate than the strongest butterflies. You breathe deeper, overthink less, and stop scanning every pause for signs that something is about to collapse. That is not boredom, that is safety becoming attraction. Of course, the early stage of love still has its own beautiful chaos, and the brain leans fully into it. Focus sharpens, energy rises, ordinary moments feel cinematic, and even a grocery store can suddenly feel loaded with meaning. But infatuation is not the full story of love. It is the invitation, not the destination. And this is where many people get confused, because the loudest feeling is not always the truest one. A loud connection can be built on fantasy, projection, timing, or old wounds finally finding a familiar shape. A quieter connection can be built on reality, which usually takes longer for the brain to trust. That is the twist most people miss. Your brain does not fall in love all at once. It falls in love in layers. First it notices, then it anticipates, then it attaches meaning, and finally it builds a private emotional world around someone. That is why one smell, one street, or one stupid joke can suddenly carry an entire relationship inside it. Love changes memory by tagging certain moments as emotionally important, and important memories get stored with extra brightness. That is also why heartbreak can feel physical, because you are not only missing a person but a whole map of associations. Even your future can feel haunted, because your brain had quietly placed that person inside tomorrow. This is why letting go can feel so confusing. Logic says one thing, while attachment speaks in a faster language. You can know someone was wrong for you and still feel yourself reaching for them in quiet moments. Attachment is the part of love that says, I turn towards you when I need comfort, grounding, or reassurance. When that bond feels threatened, stress can rise quickly, and suddenly your mind starts reading everything as a signal. A shorter text feels loaded, a delayed reply feels dangerous, and a subtle tone shift feels enormous. This does not mean you are irrational. It often means your brain is trying to protect connection, even clumsily. And this is the beautiful part. Once you understand the pattern, you stop turning every reaction into a flaw in your personality. Not everything is clinginess. Sometimes it is an alarm system shaped by unpredictability, loss, or affection that once felt hard to keep. The brain is always asking a quiet question in love, and the question is simpler than people expect. Am I safe here? Not just from rejection, but safe to be known, honest, imperfect, and still respected. When the answer slowly becomes yes, love changes form and starts feeling less like performing and more like revealing. That is where intimacy deepens because you stop managing every impression and start letting yourself be real. Real love is not just being chosen on someone's best day. It is being handled with care on your hardest one. So how does the brain tell intensity apart from actual compatibility? It watches patterns far more than promises. Not potential, not chemistry alone, and not the perfect speech after a messy week. Patterns. Does this person soothe confusion, or create it, and do hard moments lead to repair, or another guessing game? Do you feel more like yourself with them, or more like a version of yourself designed to keep them close? Those answers matter because one romantic gesture can move you, but repeated consistency can actually rewire you. This kind of love changes expectation. It teaches the brain that care does not have to be earned through anxiety. For people used to inconsistency, that can feel almost suspicious at first, which is more common than most admit. You might wonder why it does not feel more dramatic, or why you miss the rush you used to call chemistry. But often what you miss is not passion. It is the old cycle of activation, doubt, and relief. There's a huge difference between being deeply moved and being chronically triggered, even if both feel intense. One expands you and makes more room inside your life. The other keeps you busy enough to confuse survival with love. Here is a tiny everyday example. Someone who likes you in a healthy way usually does not make basic care mysterious. They may still be imperfect, distracted, and fully human, but their pattern remains understandable and emotionally legible. You are not living on breadcrumbs and calling it fate. That predictability is what lets tenderness grow roots. If this sounds like your story, you're not alone, and I'd love to hear which part feels most familiar. Roots matter more than fireworks if you want love that can survive stress, boredom, change, and ordinary Thursdays. The brain eventually adapts to constant highs, which is why some people start chasing bigger and louder proofs of love. Bigger words, bigger jealousy, bigger tests, and bigger rescues can start masquerading as depth when they are really instability. Mature love often moves the other direction. It gets simpler, clearer, steadier, and much more honest. The magic becomes less about guessing and more about knowing, which is actually a very intimate form of romance. You know they will call back, and hard conversations no longer feel like the beginning of abandonment. That kind of knowing settles into the nervous system, and the nervous system remembers peace differently than panic. Another twist most people miss is that love is partly built through attention, not just discovered through destiny. The more emotionally present you are with someone, the more your brain begins linking them with significance. That is why shared rituals matter more than they seem, even when they look tiny from the outside. Morning check-ins matter, private jokes matter, cooking together matters, and even the same goodbye at the door matters. These small moments teach the brain, this is us, and us becomes one of its strongest emotional categories. So here's something to remember. Love is not only a lightning strike, it is also 1,000 tiny associations becoming belonging. The brain needs live signals like tone, touch, attention, repair, and repeated proof that the bond is alive now. Without that, imagination steps in. And imagination can be beautiful, but also very dangerous in matters of love. It can turn mixed signals into hope, and potential into a whole relationship that never actually existed. Sometimes we are not attached to who someone is. We are attached to what our brain built around them. The imagined future becomes intoxicating, especially when it promises to heal something older than the relationship itself. That kind of longing can feel profound, but often it is love mixed with an unfinished narrative. And unfinished narratives are hard for the brain to release because the mind loves closure more than uncertainty. So we replay conversations, reread messages, and look for one more clue that would make the story feel complete. Yet the healthier move is often simpler and harder. Believe the pattern, not the possibility. That is not cynicism. It is emotional honesty. Your brain can bond with hope, but your heart eventually has to live with behavior. If someone keeps offering intensity without clarity, your system may stay activated, but it will not feel nourished. Nourishment feels different. It is warm instead of addictive, spacious instead of frantic, and clear instead of cryptic. And this is where long-term love becomes especially interesting, because the brain does not stop learning inside a relationship. It keeps absorbing the emotional climate of the bond day after day in ways both subtle and powerful. If there is kindness, repair, humor, and safety, your baseline softens over time. If there is contempt, instability, and chronic uncertainty, your baseline hardens over time. That means love is not only something you feel, it is something you practice into each other's nervous systems. The way you answer after conflict matters, the way you apologize matters, and the way you protect dignity matters. These are not tiny things, they are brain-level experiences of trust. When trust grows, love becomes less about mind reading and more about collaboration, which is far more romantic than it sounds. You do not need to test the bond every week, perform distance, or chase confusion just to feel chemistry. The healthiest love often asks for courage in a different direction, and that courage surprises many people. Not the courage to endure mixed signals, but the courage to receive consistency without sabotaging it. The courage to be met, to be softened, and to believe that simple care is not shallow care. For some people, that is the scariest part, because chaos is familiar and peace is still new. Stay curious and notice how your body feels after conversations, not only during them. Notice whether affection leaves you clearer or more confused, and whether honesty brings closeness or instability. Those signs reveal more than charisma ever could, because charisma can charm while patterns tell the truth. One more truth deserves to be said. Love in the brain is not separate from self-worth. The way you see yourself shapes what kind of treatment feels believable, familiar, and even attractive. If you expect to be overlooked, consistent care can feel suspicious or temporary instead of comforting. If you expect to prove your value, you may confuse earning love with actually experiencing love. That is why healing changes attraction. As self-respect grows, different signals start feeling desirable. Mystery becomes less impressive than emotional responsibility, and grand gestures become less convincing than steady presence. And that is a beautiful shift. It means your definition of chemistry is maturing, not disappearing. You are not becoming less romantic. You are becoming more capable of real intimacy. Real intimacy is not perfect transparency every second. It is safe honesty repeated over time. It is the freedom to say this hurt me, this matters to me, and this is what I need. When that honesty is welcomed instead of punished, the brain relaxes deeper into love. It can survive stress, hold joy, and stop preparing for loss every time something good begins. That is often the moment people describe as finally feeling at home with someone, and the word home matters. Not because the butterflies vanish, but because fear is no longer steering the story. So how does love actually work in your brain? It begins with attention and intensifies through reward and anticipation. It deepens through meaning, memory, and attachment, then becomes healthier when safety and truth teach your system to rest. The person matters, of course, but the pattern matters just as much as the chemistry ever will. If you remember nothing else, remember this. The strongest love is not always the one that makes the most noise. Often it is the one that helps you hear yourself more clearly and stay more fully yourself. It does not ask you to disappear to keep it alive, and it does not feed on confusion to stay intense. It makes room for your tenderness and your truth at the same time, which is what real closeness feels like. If this kind of honest relationship psychology speaks to you, subscribe and stay close for more reflections like this. Because love gets much less confusing once you stop worshiping the spark and start understanding the system. Then you can recognize when your brain is chasing a pattern and when your heart is finally learning a home.